His brother, Ralph Painter, was a police chief in a city in Oregon. He was shot and killed in the line of duty. He's here to talk about the incident, but mostly he's focusing on the frustration that he and his family felt at the hands of the courts and the legal system in Oregon. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show on podcast on the Newsbreak app. It's free. And get the latest crime and law enforcement news on the Newsbreak app. It's simple, easy, and free. Just download the Newsbreak app. Then search for and follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show on podcast on the Newsbreak app. Contacting us from Oregon, we have Alan Painter on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Alan's been on the show before. Just go to letradio.com and type in Alan Painter, and you will find the episodes. And he's here to talk about when his police officer brother, police chief brother, Ralph Painter, was shot and killed in the line of duty. He's also going to talk about a book that he helped inspire, that he helped the author with, that really describes the frustration they felt with the courts and everything else, called Trapped in a System, Bringing the Killer of Rainier Police Chief Ralph Painter to Justice, written by Rosemary Reynolds. Just do a Google search and you find it. Alan, again, thanks for being on the show. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate that.
So we're going to go back, and I know this is a tough subject because we had you on before, and it's always a tough subject, but your brother was shot and killed in line of duty on January 5th, 2011. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can. He, chief of police in a small town. A lot of times, the chiefs, in small towns, they go out. They go out on calls and stuff sometimes. That's just what they do because it's a very small town. He got a call January 5th. Young kid was in a show car at an audio stereo place in his town in Rainier, and he wouldn't get out. So the assistant manager of the store was panicked because he was afraid the kid was going to do damage to the car, let alone he would try to steal the car, and they didn't want that to happen. So they called the police, and Ralph happened to take that call. He showed up. I think he pepper sprayed the kid. Either the pepper spray did not have any effect.
We always said that. We had a saying, never spray mace is what we called it back in the day because it only works on police and innocent bystanders. The bad guys never works on. Yeah,
unfortunately, that was the case. I think if anything, it probably irritated him more than anything. He came out of the car swinging, caught Ralph off guard, knocked him out. Ralph ends up on the floor, and the kid goes and sits back in the car. He goes back and sits in the car, and then he looks over, and I don't know if Ralph's shirt opened enough or something where he could see his badge. And he thought, oh, shoot, that's a cop. What would trigger his mind to think, well, I'm just going to do something to this cop? I don't know. He hasn't talked a whole lot in court, so we don't really know what he was thinking. But he went over and tried to get Ralph's gun out of his holster. Ralph had just gotten a new holster from the Blumenthal's that does the uniforms and stuff for police officers. And it was a new holster that had different locking mechanisms. It's not easy to get the gun out of it. But this young man worked on it, and he finally got Ralph's gun out of the holster. And he proceeded to shoot him with his own gun. So a lot of people say, well, what if he was wearing a vest? Well, he got shot in the head. So the vest really had done no good.
Well, here's the thing about vests. And my entire career, I policed wearing a vest. When we graduated from the academy, we were given a front panel only. Because back then they said police were never shot in the back. And we had an officer named Vincent Adolfo who was shot and killed after being shot in the vest in front, and he fell down from all the impact. It's like being hit with a sledgehammer, but he landed on his chest, and the guy opened fire on his back and wound up killing him. And the vest is the last stop. It's not the first stop.
Yeah. Well, when we've had a couple of incidences here in Oregon where officers have been shot, and it actually, the way they were shot, it went up under their vest.
Yeah,
so,
or it goes through the side panels, it goes through the where it overlaps and all that stuff, and people have died as a result. Here's the thing, Alan. I know that what a lot of people don't talk about, and we will talk about this a little bit later on, is I've been in 4 shootings in 10 years in my policing career. And the first 2, I never fired a shot back. However, every one of those people had multiple prior offenses. They had multiple prior arrests, and they were never put in jail or prison the way they're supposed to. And they were allowed to go on the street and pose a risk to the safety of other people. I'm sure that was the case with your brother as well.
Yeah, he didn't have, the shooter did not have a long record. He had some weird things in his file, obviously, but nothing that would indicate that he was going to do something like this.
Did he have mental illness issues in prior contact with the police? That
I don't know. He's from Washington.
Right.
So I didn't have access to his records.
Here's the reason why I bring that up. And not to get political, but somewhere around 1980, the early 80s, laws changed where you couldn't put mentally disturbed people in hospitals and force them to take their medication. You couldn't treat their illness. They had to present a threat to other people. And once they presented a threat to other people, then you could take action. Unfortunately, in this situation, this guy, he presented the threat well after the fact. That's when they took action.
And unfortunately, in Oregon, I can't speak to Washington, but Oregon and Washington, California all kind of follow suit. They're like in this little club together, and what one state does, the other states do. They just do that. That's,
right.
And that's not probably anything recently. That's probably been going on for a while. Oregon closed their mental hospitals years ago, probably back in the, late 80s, early 90s. They just closed them. They just said they didn't have the funds to keep them open, which unfortunately puts a lot of those people on the street.
Right.
Now, in our case, I don't know that Daniel was necessarily yes, his mom and his brother had some issues, but I think in his case it was more drugs than anything, more drug-related. There were, according to the some of the records and stuff, he did have drugs in his system. He had several drugs in his system. And, in that in itself, I'm not very far from Portland here in Oregon. There's a lot of people on the streets that have mental issues.
Right.
A lot of times connected.
And a lot of times they self-medicate with alcohol and drugs, and that oftentimes makes it worse. And one of the things that really is a game changer for police, and I'm not saying this would have saved your brother's life, but in the 80s, the only thing that would counteract a violent person under the influence of cocaine or PCP or any of those other anesthetic-type drugs was choking them out until they lost consciousness. And then there was you can't do that. That's ruthless. That's cruel. And that puts a lot of people, including your brother, in jeopardy. Yeah,
it does. Well, and I don't, and even to add a little more to the case, I believe this young man at one time, Ralph lived in Rainier. He lived in Rainier up on the hill. This young man with his family, with his mom, I think his mom and dad were separated, lived across the street. So I don't know if Ralph recognized him as the kid that used to live across the street or not. And Ralph probably thought, well, he wasn't a threat back then, I always said Ralph was a lot like Andy Griffith. He's very laid back.
It sounds like Rainier was that way as well. We're going to take a short break. We're talking with Alan Painter. He's a brother of Rainier, Oregon Police Department Police Chief Ralph Painter, who was shot and killed in line of duty January 5th, 2011. He is working with, or he worked with an author named Rosemary Reynolds, writing the book, Trapped in the System, Bringing the Killer of Rainier Police Chief Ralph Painter to Justice. When we return, we're going to talk more about the after effects and the frustration that he and the family felt at the hands of courts and legislators. You can find us on Facebook. Look for and like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. Don't go anywhere. It's the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We'll be right back.
Are you turning 65 or stuck with a Medicare plan that just isn't cutting it? We make Medicare decisions and maximum coverage simple. Whether you're enrolling for the first time or looking for a better plan, our experts will help. Call 866-427-1225, 866-427-1225, 866-427-1225, or visit lethealthy.com, lethealthy.com to learn more.
From loneliness to a fulfilling, intimate relationship. Shot at Love, the book, offers insights, life lessons, and a lot of comedy. Get a copy of Shot at Love for all those looking for love and striking out. Written by Carrie Brett, a celebrity photographer and podcaster in Boston. This book will have readers crying, laughing, and learning what to do. Get it at shotatlovebook.com. It's shotatlovebook.com. That's shotatlovebook.com.
Returning our conversation with Alan Painter on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Alan, this is the second time he's appeared on the show. His brother, then police chief of Rainier, Oregon Police Department, was shot and killed in the line of duty by a criminal January 5th, 2011. And we're going to talk a little bit about trial. We're going to talk a lot about the delays, the lengthy delays and frustration that he felt, so much so. He got together with author Rosemary Reynolds. The book that she wrote is called Trapped in the System, Bringing the Killer of Rainier Police Chief Ralph Painter to Justice. Do a Google search. Just on a Ralph Painter, I'm sure you'll find it as well. Alan, again, thanks for being on the show, rehashing a really bad incident. Last time we talked about the impact on your mom, the impact on you, other family members. And as a family member and as a police officer myself, you never thought this would happen to you. And I'm sure your brother thought this is just a routine call. It's not a big deal. This is a kind of town where things like this don't occur. That right there, a lot of people think, oh, it's a sleepy area, nothing bad happens. It happens there too. It happens there too, far more often than people realize. So you got the word that your brother been shot and killed. They had a suspect under arrest. Am I correct?
You are correct. Yep. They took him, arrested him. And of course, he sat in jail locally for a while. But he caused so much disruption in our local jail that they actually transported him to Portland to Multnomah County because he was just too much for our local jailers to handle. He would do stupid stuff to them,
They usually do.
Or soap their floor so they'd slip and fall, and stuff. And the jail was just tired of it. The local jail was just tired of it, and they shipped him to Portland.
How old of a guy was this? And by the way, there was a protracted gunfight. I had an officer on the show that responded from the nearby state of Washington to talk about this.
Yes, Doug Kaczynski. That's correct. I've talked to Doug. Thank you so much for setting that up.
I'm glad you two connected. And by the way, just go to letradio.com and check it out. Just put in Ralph Painter and you'll find all the episodes. So let's fast forward. He's arrested. He goes... Well, I'll let you say it, because you think that right away the wheels of justice, by the way, as I was saying, they go very slowly. And in some states, they go really slow. And in your case, it was very slow, wasn't it?
Very slow. The first, I'd say, it took a while to get to an arraignment because he was so disruptive. In fact, if I remember correctly, we had to hold the actual arraignment down at the jail, the local jail, when he was still in town because they didn't want to transport him. He was just that disruptive. So we actually went down to the jail for the arraignment. Got arraigned. He had a defense attorney at that time. For some reason, he didn't like him. After about a year and a half, they let him go. But while that first defense attorney was part of the case, we thought we were going to trial in about maybe in a 2-year period. Well, once the new defense team came in, that didn't happen. That defense team somehow, it's hard to explain, but it's almost like they had the judge wrapped around their finger. That's what it appeared from the family perspective.
They know how to delay trials. They know that's part of what they do. And the reason why they do that, by the way, is witnesses become forgetful. Some witnesses don't show up in court. All the things that benefit their client, the defendant, goes their way. So they delay it for as long as possible. Is that what happened with you?
Yeah, and there was another guy in the garage when all this happened. We actually had the assistant manager plus another customer in there. I don't know that they saw a lot of what happened. And I tried to get in contact with the customer, and then he was in the military, so they took him out of the country for a while. So I never got a chance to hook up with him. I wanted to talk to him, but I didn't get that opportunity.
That time you didn't, but how about now? Have you connected?
No, unfortunately, no, I haven't. And I've asked. Things have happened since then. The DA has gone on now. He's in Portland now as a DA in Portland, and I've lost track. I still do want to hook up with him some point. More than anything, Jay, I want him to know that there's nothing that him and that assistant manager could have done that day. In reading now I have more access to stuff than I ever had before. There's nothing they could have done that day, and I don't want them to feel guilty for that. I guess that's more than anything. I just don't want them to feel guilty.
I hear you. Well, you share a bond, and it's a bond of trauma, and people love to turn that phrase of trauma bonding, and that's not necessarily what it is. But here's the thing, Alan, you have never struck me as being an aggressive kind of guy. Maybe when we were younger we might have been, but not now.
Maybe a little mischievous towards my younger brother, but neither Ralph or I. Ralph didn't have a mean bone in his body. And that's what we've said in court several times, that, shoot, if this young man was struggling with something, with drugs or whatever, Ralph would have been the first person to help him.
Right.
He was that type of officer. I mean, he would have gone out of his way to help the young man.
Man, I wish I had $1 for every time someone said to me, thank you for arresting me because you helped me get sober. You helped me get clean.
Exactly.
Or a family disturbance, whatever it was, you helped with our family. That doesn't get press, and it's not newsworthy. So quite often the media doesn't report it. And a lot of departments don't report it either, but that's something that a lot of us did, and we did on a daily basis. It was far more frequent than arresting people.
Exactly. Well, and officer, it's not always about arresting people and trying to make them look bad. Sometimes they need help, and that's the part of the service part of to protect and to serve. That's the service part of that, and I think officers take that very seriously. Most of them do.
Most do.
I think most of them take that pretty seriously.
One of the things you said was, I want to interrupt you really quickly. He was probably under the influence of drugs, and I saw many times that this guy had some mental illness issues, that he had drug abuse issues, other things. I want to make a point of clarification. No one goes to jail because they have a drug problem. They go to jail because of their actions. If you do things that harm other people, I don't really care what the reason why is, and neither should the courts.
You and I are on the same page in that. I totally agree. We were all brought up, most of us brought up, knowing right from wrong. I don't care if you have mental issues. I've got a younger brother, our youngest brother, who has mental issues, and he still knows right from wrong. Right. Because we were brought up that way, Unfortunately, this young man, and I think I shared last time on your show that he had a terrible dad. His dad taught him to fight. Just anybody that questioned him, anybody that confronted him, his dad taught him to fight, and that's what he did.
Well, there's a time and place for everything. Look, I'm more of a fight. I'm actually wearing a shirt my wife got me, and I call her the boss. And it says a T-shirt. I don't run, I reload. And it's because I'm too old to run away from you, so I will stand and fight you, and I will shoot. I don't. Look, we're going to put me in prison, but I'm not going to. If I'm doing something wrong and a police comes up and questions me, I'm not going to start firing. And most normal people won't. Right.
Well, I don't think it's normal, but, he had some issues going on in his life, but there again, like you were saying, I don't think that excuses you for something you do. It just doesn't. You do something wrong, you have to pay the consequences for that.
Well, we were always taught, this is a saying I got from someone else. I'd love to claim it. I can't. Issues are like tissues. They're like that brand of tissue paper. Yeah, pull one out and magically, boom, there's another one right behind it. We all have issues. I don't know if anybody gets through this thing called life unscathed and doesn't have something to deal with. We're talking with Alan Painter. He's brother of Ralph Painter, who was the chief of police for the Rainier Police Department, Oregon. He was shot and killed, Ralph was, by a criminal on January 5th, 2011. And that was a big part of the frustration. That's a big part of the pain. But the problems with the courts and the delays of justice have been excruciating. He's worked with author Rosemary Reynolds, writing a book called Trapped in the System, Bringing the Killer of Rainier Police Chief Ralph Painter to Justice. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
There are more than 700 free podcast episodes of the Law Enforcement Talk radio show. Episodes are converted to a free podcast after airing on radio. You're bound to find a podcast episode that suits you at letradio.com, letradio.com. That's letradio.com.
Here's your chance to get into the ground floor, to make a donation to make the movie Gun Runner, based off of the true story of now retired police detective Maria Oliveira, who shot 6 times while investigating a crime, died 3 times, brought back to life, was in a hospital for a month, rushed back to work, only to suffer a near-fatal heart attack, and then several months later, a near-fatal stroke. It talks about his recovery, his life after, and more. That's at gunrunnerfilm.com. Again, you can make a donation at gunrunnerfilm.com.
Imagine earning an extra $500 to $5,000 a month or more from the comfort of your home or business, all with Facebook. That's right. Meta is paying people just like you every month. Learn how to create another revenue stream from Meta and dramatically increase your reach, all without breaking your own time bank. Sign up for a free membership at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Return a conversation with Alan Painter on the Law Enforcement Talk radio show. Alan's brother, Ralph Painter, was chief of police for the Rainier Police Department in Oregon. Ralph was shot and killed by a criminal on January 5th, 2011. His frustration, the family's frustration with the slow wheels of justice, well, you will not believe what has occurred, led him to work with author Rosemary Reynolds. She wrote a book called Trapped in the System, bringing the killer of Rainier Police Chief Ralph Painter to justice. Again, Alan, thanks for rehashing stuff that is not fun to talk about. We think now. I'm an older guy. I think of the Perry Mason type things. You get arrested, you're in court a month later. Boom, everybody's prepared. You go through it, and it's wrapped up in an hour. That was not the case for you all, was it?
Oh, we could have only hoped for something like that, Jay. No, it was not. Like I said, a year and a half into it, switched defense teams. The new defense team seemed to run the court. I felt bad for the DA. We had 2 different DAs. Should probably enter that too. We had 2 different DAs. First DA lasted for about halfway into it for about 4 years. Then his wife passed, and he wanted to be done. He was done. He'd done it for all of his life, and he was ready to retire. So a new DA comes into the picture, having to deal with all this stuff and trying to catch up on everything. He came into the picture and, catching up right away. But we're 4 years into this, and we're closer to a trial. Closer to a trial. Yeah, 4 years into it at this point, about the time of the switching of the DAs, and we're still no closer to a trial than anything. We haven't even gotten all this. Let me back up just a little bit. About a year and a half, the judge looked at the young man and told him that he thought he was gaming the system, and that he was just playing the court. Those are his words. And I have a tendency to agree with that. I think the young man was smart enough to know exactly what he was doing in gaming the system and just playing the court for everything he could. 4 years into it, switched DAs, a new DA comes in. He's a young guy, and he's on fire, too. He wants to see this case go to trial. 1 year goes by, 2 years goes by, 3 years. I think at about 7 years, we finally got to a point where we could try to see if he's competent enough to stand trial.
What was the delay? Why was it 7 years?
Because the judge ordered him to receive some drugs to level him out, and the state hospital said no. They had done testing on him, and they said that he didn't need it. There was nothing wrong with him. They're not going to do that. So the judge trying to strong arm the DA, and the DA said, no, I'm going to go with what the state hospital said. And so he appeals to the Supreme Court, the Oregon Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court agrees with the judge. So they make him take some psychotic drugs to level him out. And they said it during that time period. And mind you, most of this time that they're they're administering the drugs, he has to be at the state hospital because they want to monitor it. He's not in jail.
Right.
So over half the time he was arrested, He camped out at the state hospital at a super high expense to the taxpayers.
And how many times did you and your family wind up having to go to court during a 7-year process?
Oh my gosh, I want to say, because this just came out the other day from Rosemary, I think it was over 100 times.
Wow.
There was over 100 hearings in that time frame. So, I won't say not once a month, but once every probably month and a half, every couple of months.
And here's what
he wasn't always there. He wasn't always at those hearings.
But here's what a lot of people don't take consider. Number one, it's called the criminal justice system, and it is not the victim justice system. It is not the family members of victims justice system. And really, I hate to say this in a negative way, and I don't want to come across that way, but their concern is not Alan Painter. Their concern is not the mom of Alan Painter, Ralph Painter. They're not concerned about anybody except the defendant.
Yeah, Jay, you hit that right on the head. You've seen lately, I can't even pin a year, but lately that seems to be the way our justice system has swung. That pendulum has swung that direction, where they have more passion for the criminal than they do for the victim or the victim's family. I mean, that's just where we're at. And Oregon's caught in that too.
And I would say that we need to have a fair, equitable justice system where we look out for the rights of those people. We really do. But I think personally, a lot of these politicians and a lot of judges are politicians need to grow a thing called a backbone. And they need to stand up and do the right thing and say, no, I'm not going to do this. Back when you said earlier, the judge said, I think you're gaming the system, but they allowed it to continue, and they never should have.
They did. Well, there's a couple of things that go along with this that it didn't even come out in the book. That judge had just tried a previous murder case to ours. Everybody knew this lady in town. She was murdered viciously. He allowed the murderer to be his own defense, and that guy I think he got a stiff sentence where he'll never be paroled, and that's the proper sentence. He should have got that. In my opinion, he should have got the death penalty, but that'll never happen here in Oregon. That judge allowed him to do that. And I really think that laid on the back of his mind. He hated himself for that because he thought he should have made him pick a defense team. That was just before our case. So that judge is still dealing with that. He's also the drug court judge, and he has great compassion for people on drugs and people on alcohol because he himself is a recovered alcoholic. I get that.
That's great. That's not in dispute. Again, this goes to actions, not inflictions, not diseases.
Right. Yep. And that judge he's dealing with all this stuff. In my opinion, he should have recused himself from the case. He should have never taken the case on. We should have probably had a judge come out of Portland that wasn't attached to our county at all. That didn't happen. And this judge was just dealing with his own demons, in my opinion. He was dealing with his own demons, trying to deal with all that stuff right in the middle of this. And he should have never tried the case.
Someone else should have handled it. I agree with you. One of the things I want to go back to is the family members, yourself including your mom, everybody else, kind of has to get themselves motivated to show up. And am I going to testify today? Do I have to relive this today? And it's an emotional roller coaster. And then to be let down, how vicious was that? How much of a traumatic blow was that for you all? It
was hard because every time you go to court, you always hinge on that little bit of hope. Well, maybe the judge will see something different today. Maybe we'll actually start heading towards a trial. And mind you, at this point, there's no plea deal out there. We're still thinking trial. And the DA was trying his hardest. He really was. I mean, he was doing everything. And yes, the death penalty was in play, and the DA explained it. The reason that stays in play is because if we go to a trial, that allows the DA to pick part of the jury. Otherwise, you're allowing the defense team to pick a lot of the jury candidates, and the DA is not left out of the picture, but they have very, very little say.
Right.
Keep the death penalty in play, it keeps that in play. He has some say in the jury selection. So, it was hard on a lot of family members. My poor mom, I mean, I took her as much as I could. She couldn't go to all of them. But she went as much as she could, and the rest of the family members. Every time you go to trial, I mean, it just opens that scab up, and you have to hear stuff brought out in court, again, so.
I get when you say, and you mentioned we'll go into more details about it in the next segment, but you mentioned plea deal. And part of the reasoning for a lot of these is they don't want to overly traumatize the victim or family members of the victim. How much did that come and play for you all?
It did. We were split. The DA said that we had to be pretty much on board with the plea. He kind of introduced it with a judge from Portland. She came out. She had tried murder cases before. She walked us through the plea as opposed to a trial, what the pros and cons. I mean, we had like a whiteboard, and she had it all spelled out.
Man, we're going to take a short break. We're talking with Alan Painter, and by the way, the plea deal was offered for the killer of his brother, Police Chief Ralph Painter from Rainier Police Department, Oregon. He got inspired, got with an author, Rosemary Reynolds, and she wrote a book called Trapped in a System, Bringing the Killer of Rainier Police Chief Ralph Painter to Justice. When we return, we're going to talk more about the unnecessary delays, frustration, you name it. It's all coming up on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. If you do any business on social media, creating content is one thing. The trick is, how do you turn those people that comment on your social media into consumers? There's a great tool, and you can get more information at letpops.com. That's letpops.com. Best of all, you can start it for free. letpops.com. Check it out today.
Your golden years are supposed to be easy and worry-free, at least in regards to finances. If you are over 70, you can turn your life insurance policy into cash. Visit letsavings.com. That's letsavings.com. letsavings.com. Or call 866-480-4252. Again, that's 866-480-4252 to see if you qualify.
Return our conversation with Alan Painter on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Alan's brother, Ralph Painter, was a police chief in Rainier, Oregon. He was shot and killed in the line of duty by a criminal January 5th of 2011. Alan got with Rosemary Reynolds, an author, and she wrote the book called Trapped in a System, Bringing the Killer of Rainier Police Chief Ralph Painter to Justice. And it's a long, long journey. Again, Alan, thanks for reliving this. Before we come fast forward, did this guy eventually go to prison?
He did. It took us a little over 8 years to get to where the plea was entered in court. A lot of competency hearings up to that point. We did get to a point where we did the competency hearings. That was a whole week long, and he was finally found competent to stand trial. That was the whole reason for those. Then we talked about the plea. Then the judge came out of Portland. She walked us through, if we did a plea deal, what that would involve. And part of the deal with the plea is, with the justice system right now, there's a good chance, and I mean, I can't imagine a governor ever doing this, but a governor could, what do they call that, excuse their case. I mean, she did that. She did that recently. She did that recently before she left office with over 1,000 criminals, and some of them were murderers, rapists, pedophiles. She did that.
Right.
So that was always in the back of her mind. Well, that could happen. So, especially with the political climate here in Oregon. So the plea deal, if it was acceptable to both sides, and obviously the defense was on board with it, would mean that he would go to prison for a set amount of time. The chances of him trying to appeal that are a lot less.
Right.
I don't think in a plea you can really do an appeal.
Usually, it wipes out an appeal on when you plead guilty to something. That's part of the deal. What was this guy given? What was the final sentence of the plea deal?
He was given 48 years, almost 49 years, but they were going to take the 8+ years that he had already served. They were counting that as time served. So he'll end up doing about 43 years or something like that. Yeah.
And that's before we take into consideration early releases, good behavior, all that stuff. So in theory, this guy could serve 24 total.
Well, that to us, the way it was explained to us, that's part of the reason for the plea. He will serve all that time.
Okay.
Mind you, Jay, it was not just murdering my brother. He opened gunfire on all the officers that showed up at the scene. I mean, there was a gunfight that ensued. So there's like 29 counts against him. Part of it is if you're doing a crime and you do another, murder, he did, and you're doing that in the middle of another crime, it intensifies I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an officer, but if I remember right, it intensifies the crime, the severity of the crime. And it did that. It did much more than that. He had 29 counts against him, and I think some of those were knocked down. But there was more than just murdering my brother. There was attempted murder to the other officers that were there and stuff too. So, I mean, my opinion, it should have been life with no parole.
And I'll be honest with you, when it comes to capital punishment, I know a lot of people have different ideas and different mindset. Mm-hmm. Here's mine. We ought to reinstate capital punishment for certain crimes. When you're found guilty and you give an execution date, you should be executed. And here's the reason why. Because jail guards, corrections officers, volunteers, they're all nurses. They are raped by these career criminals that are doing life. And by the way, guess who they sell with? They sell with your kid who got a minor charge and he's got 3 years. All of a sudden, these guys don't care because they got nothing to live for. What are you going to do to them?
Right. Yeah, and I totally agree. And Oregon hasn't done an execution, I don't even know, for a long time. Didn't
Oregon, when I used to watch these Westerns and read novels and stuff about the wild West. Wasn't Oregon, California, and Washington State, wasn't that the last of the frontier where they would execute you in a heartbeat?
Yeah. Back in the day. But, boy, that has sure changed. That's
what happened? When did these people lose their sense?
I don't know, Jay. It's just weird living in a state that really – and, like I said, the governor, she let over 1,000 prisoners out. And it gets worse than that even. I mean, she did things before she let them out. She erased their records. She allowed some of them to change their names so there was nothing would ever follow them. Who does that? What about the families, the victims of a rapist? They're out and free now.
I
can't even imagine that. And she did not meet with the families before she did that.
They don't care. It's the criminal justice system, and it's about politics, and it's about what is going to benefit them, and they don't care about the family members. And I had a retired police officer from Hartford, Connecticut, on the show a couple times. She's one of my favorite people in the whole world. And she was suddenly attacked by a woman. It was a neighbor. It was a landlord dispute. She was suddenly attacked by a woman, stabbed multiple times, almost died, had her throat slit. You name it, all that stuff. And in Connecticut, what they wound up doing was she's not guilty by reason of insanity, and therefore all the orders of protection, all that stuff, where she can show up on her front lawn. There's nothing you can do about it.
That's terrible. That's terrible.
They don't care. They just don't care because it's not their family. They don't care.
Yeah. Well, I felt that way sitting in court. You sit there, I mean, hearing after hearing, you're thinking, does the judge not have any compassion for the family at all? And it doesn't appear that he does. I share with somebody that recently, and the judge was in a restaurant, and I sat about maybe 12, 15 feet away from him. I told my wife, he's sitting there by himself. I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go over and have a conversation with him. She goes, you better not. She goes,
you better not. It's like your wife like mine.
She goes, that could hurt us in court. She goes, I said, I'm just going to tell him what I think, what I feel. She goes, yeah, I wouldn't do that. Well, good thing I listened to her. I did not. I did not do it. I should have. I wanted to. But I didn't, and she's right. It could have hurt us in court.
The thing that really disturbs me about this, Alan, is that lost your brother. He sounds like he was a great guy, and the impact on you and your family. But really, what really bothers me even more so about this is the unnecessary delays, the complications, and this word that keeps coming up: plea deal. And granted, he got a lot of time, but nothing's going to bring your brother back. And there's no closure. There's no sense of justice, is there?
No, there isn't. I remember you had a guest on, Jim Whitehead, and talked about closure. There really is no closure. You learn to find a new normal. That's what I call it. You live. I mean, you live beyond that. You get through it, and everybody deals with it differently. I like what I had a friend that was in a bombing. It was police involved in a bombing, and then somebody asked him how he got through it, and he says the 3 F's: faith, family, and friends.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's a really good response. And I thought, that's pretty much how I got through it.
And by the way, Jim Whitehead, his son, Mark Allen Whitehead, was a reserve deputy. He was killed in line of duty, and he just passed away fairly recently. A great guy.
Yeah, he did. He was a great guy. He really was he was a great mentor to many of us in the cops family, and he will be greatly missed.
And Cops, by the way, is Concerns of Police Survivors. They do awesome work. I want to shift your attention to the book by Rosemary Reynolds called Trapped in a System, Bringing the Killer of Rainier Police Chief Ralph Painter to Justice. How did you get involved in that?
You know what? That mostly happened during the competency hearings. The competency hearings were all week long. And I went to probably 4 of the 5 days. I missed one day, and that's the day I wish I hadn't missed because my daughter went and filled me in. But it's the day I wish I would have been there. But anyway, media had to sit across. Our family sat on one side. His family, the murderer's family, sat on the other side, and the media sat on that side. And I was texting with Rosemary one day in court. Things were delayed a lot, so we had a lot of time sometimes in between. So I was texting her. I said, man, Rosemary, there's enough. I think she actually told me, she goes, there's enough material here, Ellen, for a book. And after the hearing that day, we laughed, we laughed about it. I think it was probably a couple of hearings later, 3-4 months later, I said, Rosemary, I'm thinking about what you said. And I think there is. I think there's enough material here for a book.
And they say that the rest is history. The name of the book is Trapped in a System, Bringing the Killer of Rainier Police Chief Ralph Painter to Justice by Rosemary Reynolds. Be sure to look for it. Alan, thanks for being guest on the show, reliving this horrible story. Both very much appreciated.
Thank you, Jay. I really appreciate the time.
This was a podcast version of the nationally syndicated Law Enforcement Talk radio show, and we are so glad that you decided to join us. Big thanks to our guests for telling their story on the show. 2 simple things you can do. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com. That's letradio.com. And be sure to follow us or like us on Facebook. Do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Talk radio show. And be sure when you see a post that we put up that you like, that you resonate with, that gets your attention, be sure to share it with your friends. We'll be back in just a few days with another great episode of the show. See you then.